But essentially, I'm an African woman who believes in freedom and justice, social justice, political justice, economic justice for all people. And so I was one of those young people who was targeted by COINTELPRO because I was an activist, because I was opposed to the United States government's policies, because I was opposed to racism. Political prisoners are conscious of the reasons for that oppression and are clearly struggling against the system. In order to be happy, you have to start to remove the garbage. And that means becoming active, that means becoming conscious, that means becoming aware, and that means studying. Well, I mean, it's very hard to get the message out all over the world because the United States controls the media. The FBI admitted that it had a COINTEL program to neutralize activists. And they neutralize them in all kinds of ways: assassination, false imprisonment, false charges, etc. But they never admitted to who were the victims.
I grew up and became a political activist, participating in student struggles, the anti-war movement, and most of all, in the movement for the liberation of African Americans in the United States. I later joined the Black Panther Party, an organization that was targeted by the COINTELPRO program, a program that was set up by the Federal Bureau of Investigation to eliminate all political opposition to the U.S. government's policies, to destroy the Black liberation movement in the United States, to discredit activists, and to eliminate potential leaders. The FBI, with the help of local police agencies, systematically fed false accusations and fake news articles to the press, accusing me and other activists of crimes we did not commit. At this point, I think that it is important to make one thing very clear. I have advocated, and I still advocate, revolutionary changes in the structure and in the principles that govern the United States. I advocate self-determination for my people and for all oppressed people inside the United States. I advocate an end to capitalist exploitation, the abolition of racist policies, the eradication of sexism, and the elimination of political repression. The United States has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. There are more than 1.7 million people in U.S. prisons. This number does not include the more than 500,000 people in city and county jails, nor does it include the alarming number of children in juvenile institutions. The result of this reality is devastating. Prisons are big business in the United States, and the building, running, and supplying of prisons has become the fastest growing industry in the country. Factories are moving into the prisons, and prisoners are forced to work for slave wages. This super exploitation of human beings has meant the institutionalization of a new form of slavery. Those who cannot find work on the streets are forced to work in prison. Serious racial bias was found on the part of judges and prosecutors. What we call God is unimportant as long as we do God's work. I believe that the time has ended when slavery, colonialism, and oppression can be carried out in the name of religion. And it has been my belief in God and in the goodness of human beings that has helped me to survive. I believe that Jesus was a political prisoner who was executed because he fought against the evils of the Roman Empire, because he fought against the greed of the money changers in the temple, because he fought against the sins and injustices of his time. As a true child of God, Jesus spoke up for the poor, for the meek, for the sick, and the oppressed. The early Christians were thrown into lions' dens. I will try to follow the example of so many who have stood up in the face of overwhelming oppression. I only ask you to examine the social reality of the United States and to speak out against the human rights violations that are taking place. Most of the people who live on this planet are still not free. I believe it is the only way we will ever achieve peace and prosperity on this earth.
I was very much impressed by the healthcare system, by the education system, by the sports teams, by all of the many things that the revolution has been able to accomplish. What has impressed me most has been how people live, just how people relate to each other. I mean, I come from a society that is literally at war with itself. I didn't even know how to react to people when I came here. People would just come off the street and start talking to me, and I would immediately get paranoid. What do they want? It was very difficult for me to realize, somebody would say, what time is it, or where did you buy that? Because Cubans will come up to you and just talk to you, whether you were in a store, on a line, and that was something very different, that human contact. In order to keep colonialism fat, in order to keep the plantation owners that profited from our sweat and labors, we were kidnapped and brought here as prisoners, and our status hasn't changed, whether it's on the streets. We're prisoners of the ghettos, in Harlem. We're prisoners small tenements. We're prisoners of urine smelling hallways. And I mean, I've always been a prisoner. I've never been free in my life. I don't know what freedom means. Sitting in this place on this plantation, you think back to what those slaves had to deal with, and that probably the only beauty that they saw was the human beauty between them and the beauty of the sky and of the trees and of the grass. I think that probably helped them to survive, to stay alive internally, spiritually. How we live in this earth is very much tied to how we think about nature. And so I think that it's important for African people and all people who appreciate living to make sure that our children and our grandchildren have a planet that is livable. And that means to make very serious changes in the order of the priorities and the politics